The Port of Seattle runs both SeaTac and our seaport. They're big and getting bigger. Can you imagine running one of the largest container ports in North America, or trying to make 29 million airplane passengers happy? Tay Yoshitani does. Tay comes with experience, though, at the Port of Los Angeles and the Maryland Port of Administration, as the executive director of the Port of Oakland, which also has a seaport and airport, and as a senior advisor to the National Association of Waterfront Employers, where he was an industry expert on port security and environment. At 7, Tay arrived from Japan and saw his first U.S. port, Seattle. He must have hit the beach running because he graduated from Westport and then got his MBA from Harvard. Now returning to Seattle to showcase the port for us is Tay Yoshitani, CEO of the Port of Seattle, with observations about the seaport, the airport, and going green. Please welcome Tay Yoshitani.
Good afternoon. I was noting that there was a little bit of problem with the mic, so if you can't hear me in the back, please raise your hand and I'll try to get a little bit closer to the speaker. Is that okay? Okay, great. Well, let me thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the port. This is an institution that obviously I'm very excited about and very proud of, and it's an honor to be here to speak on their behalf. You know, one of the questions that I was asked back in last March when I was first arrived here in the Port of Seattle was what changes I had in mind, logical question, and what new direction the port would be taking. I didn't really respond at that time, I think appropriately so, other than to say that I thought that the port was pretty well managed. I knew that it had a great reputation. I'd been kicking around the industry for a while, and that course corrections rather than wholesale changes would probably be in order. And I want to give lots of credit to the former CEO, Mick Dinsmore, my good friend, and to past and current port commissioners, some of whom are here today, and to the port staff. We got a table full here. Commissioners Lloyd Hara and Bob Edwards, who've already been introduced. Well, I've been here almost 5 months, and I'm pleased to say that my initial assessments were quite accurate. Overall, the port business is in pretty good shape. But let me remind you that we are in several lines of business, and my assessment differs for each one of those businesses. And I'll get into a little more detail as we go forward. Overall, we have a AAA bond rating on our general obligation bonds, the very highest you can get. We also have a AA rating on our revenue bonds, which are also among the highest. But like any business with a diversified portfolio, some segments will perform better than others for a variety of reasons. And again, I'll get into a little more detail on that. Today, I'd like to talk about 3 main things. A change in direction to leverage on what I know is a competitive strength for the Pacific Northwest. Secondly, a new initiative to reach out in a more relevant and rewarding way to small businesses. And thirdly, an organizational adjustment to streamline our operations to focus on our core businesses and property holdings. As I said, we're in several lines of business, and I know that you're all familiar with SeaTac. As John mentioned, we will have about 30 million people go through our airport this year. We have new international nonstop flights to Paris and to Mexico City, and a number of new domestic nonstop services. And just a few days ago, we began pouring the concrete for the long-awaited third runway project. I know you're all familiar with that. In '07, the port's total capital budget is about $654 million, the highest year on record. And although most major airports are almost constantly under construction, our capital program will begin to wind down to some extent as the third runway is completed. We are very well positioned competitively at the airport. I'm sure that everyone here has seen firsthand the great investments we've made over the years at SeaTac. And just as an aside, I recently had the experience of transferring through Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris and ended up missing my connection because that airport, along with many other airports, both nationally and internationally, are so chaotic. Not so at SeaTac. SeaTac is your airport. It's a great airport, and I hope that you're as proud of it as we are at the Port of Seattle. On to the seaport. We are having another record year in the cruise industry, and many of you have probably witnessed that. This year we will have 190 cruise vessel calls serving more than 750,000 round-trip passengers. But with respect to the container cargo business, it should be no surprise to anyone that we are in a more competitive environment than ever before. You know, at the macro level, driven primarily by continued growth of trade with China, the West Coast ports as a whole are expected to continue to grow in the long term, although there will be some fluctuations month to month. But in the Pacific Northwest, the Port of Seattle is in an absolute dogfight. The Port of Vancouver, BC recently consolidated 3 ports into one operating unit, eliminating local competition and giving them the ability to expand their business and their efforts to take more cargo away from the ports of Seattle and Tacoma. By the end of this year, Prince Rupert, which is about 600 miles north of us and is a day's sail closer to Asia, will open the first phase of its container terminal. Prince Rupert is being aided by the Canadian government and eventually will have about the same cargo capacity as Seattle and Tacoma separately. And while we cooperate with the Port of Tacoma on things like security, environmental programs, and many infrastructure issues, they are aggressively soliciting business away from us. I have absolutely no reservation in reporting to you that Tacoma currently is attempting to negotiate away a couple of our key customers. I strongly believe that they ought to be looking at taking cargo away from Canada or from California rather than from us. And this kind of competition absolutely makes no sense from a regional or statewide perspective, but they don't seem to see it that way. We in Seattle have taken important steps to remain competitive. We have invested more than $1 billion in modern container terminals, and we will have a new terminal online in '09. With these investments, the Port of Seattle has the capacity to almost double our current throughput, which currently is about 2 million TEUs annually, 20-foot equivalents. Our disadvantage comes from the fact that we do not have the ability in the near term to build new mega terminals, which are the 200 acres plus by current industry standards. So we cannot compete for major carriers who are looking for mega terminals in the Pacific Northwest. Where we can and will continue to compete is for carriers, existing carriers looking to start new services, or new strings as we call them in the industry. And with projected continued growth along the West Coast, these opportunities are significant. We are paying attention to the infrastructure needed to make sure that we can move the goods once they land at our terminals or when they are on their way to the terminals from the inland. For instance, we're working to maintain road access to and from our terminals by completing the Highway 519 project near our two stadiums and by continuing to invest in grade separation projects. But I have to say that with this intense competition and growing competition, I believe that we must find a new and creative way to compete. We must find a way to leverage on our strength and to differentiate ourselves from other ports. And as we thought about this, the answer became fairly obvious. We happen to be one of only a couple of major ports in the country that are currently within what is called an attainment area, which means that we meet all federal clean air standards. That may not be a big thing to some of you, but if you've been to some of the other cities that I've been to, you'll know what I'm talking about. When a given port such as Los Angeles or Long Beach exceeds standards for emission of pollutants, or as in a non-attainment area, they face very strict rules about expanding or getting new building permits. This can be extremely problematic because the ports are then forced to impose very stringent measures on their customers to correct those problems. The Port of Seattle, on the other hand, has historically operated in a region that is well known for its environmental stewardship. And this unique strength differentiates us from other areas. And this is where we want to leverage. And it is why we want to use our environmental stewardship as our competitive edge. So this is how we plan to compete in the future. As I look at it, as I look at other ports, particularly in California, I know that they are having serious problems dealing with environmental issues. Just my personal assessment is that if they do everything right over the next 10 years, they will be where we are today. Just my personal assessment. So if we can continue to move forward smartly and aggressively, get ahead of the curve, stay ahead of the curve, and as the saying goes, we can secure and retain what I truly believe will be a growing and increasingly important competitive edge. Well, how do we do that? How do we get ahead of the curve and build this competitive edge? Most of you in this room are in positions of leadership with your respective organizations, and you know that there is nothing more powerful than a clear and definitive goal, a goal that is simple to understand, clearly relevant, and one that each and every member of your organization can embrace and understand how to contribute to. So we've decided that our goal will be to be the cleanest, greenest, and the most energy-efficient port in the United States. Now, some may say, well, what's the big deal? I think it is a big deal. It's a big deal because this goal will be the cornerstone of almost everything we do. It's going to be the basis on how we will compete, as I mentioned. It will be the central theme in all levels of planning, whether it's strategic planning or budgeting. It will be an important driver of our capital spending in the future. It will play center stage. It will play center stage in our new branding. And it will be the key to what and how we communicate with our stakeholders. And perhaps most importantly, it will be the basis on how we energize the port. We've adopted a bottom-up approach to this initiative. Each and every staff member, regardless of level or role, will be challenged to identify opportunities, large or small, to help us be the cleanest, greenest, and the most energy-efficient port in the U.S. And I have to tell you that I can't think of a better way to energize a group of highly motivated professionals. My staff has already been developing an aggressive green program, But let me point out just a few of the major environmental initiatives that we have already accomplished and are quite proud of. At the seaport, and these are just examples, we are the only port in the world to have 2 cruise berths with shore power available, the only one in the world. We led and managed the comprehensive study of marine air emissions in the region, along with Puget Sound Clean Air Agency and other partners. Seaport maintenance equipment runs on B99 biodiesel, and much of the equipment used by many of our marine terminal operators also operate on biodiesel. We helped negotiate an agreement with the cruise ship industry to govern release of wastewater in Puget Sound and other state waters, and it is among the strictest in the country. We've been a leader in the cleanup of contaminated sediment in the harbor and Lower Duwamish. The port has created significant habitat in Lower Duwamish and other harbor areas, including 3 habitat demonstration sites, more than any other agency. And later this year, at Pier 24, we will restore 2 acres of valuable shallow water habitat. Let me talk a little bit about what's going on at the airport in this regard. It also has a very strong record, one that we're all proud of. I know that many of you are familiar with our noise program. We were one of the first airports in the nation to phase out noisier Stage 2 aircraft. In addition, we've insulated about 9,400 homes in soundproof classrooms at Highland Community College and also at Highland School District. Environmental issues are not only about noise, however. We all understand that. We built the first compressed natural gas fueling station to be open to the public in the state. Airport vehicles, shuttle vans, and also taxis all use the station. The taxi fleet also uses some hybrid vehicles. The construction of the 3rd runway at the SeaTac required filling about 20 acres of low-quality wetlands. We responded by creating or enhancing 119 acres near the airport and 68 acres along the Green River near Auburn. The airport recycles about 1,250 tons of material annually, including mixed paper, cardboard, aluminum cans, plastics, and glass. Coffee grounds, much of which probably are Starbucks, are composted and bulk grease is recycled as biodiesel. Also, unsold food from the restaurant concession is distributed to food banks in South King County, serving about 870 families a month. Energy used at SeaTac has been reduced about 25% a square foot through lighting retrofits. Water use has been reduced by 19%. In addition, more than 37,000 megawatt hours of green energy have been purchased by SeaTac. These are great accomplishments, and again, these are just representative of the way we're conducting business. This is a great beginning, but I have to tell you that we are far from being finished. By the end of the year, we will have agreements with the ports of Tacoma and Vancouver, BC, to further reduce emissions from port-related businesses and tenants, including ocean-going vessels and other harbor craft, trains, and trucks. We're working with community groups, regulatory agencies, and others to develop a vision for the lower Duwamish River, which preserves maritime industrial uses and provides for increased fish and wildlife habitat. And when beginning any new building project, we look at sustainability and life cycle costs, including such issues as the use of recycled materials and low-cost materials. Our next building at the airport, which some of you know is going to be a rental car facility, will be submitted for a LEED certification. And we're very, very optimistic about that. We're paving the 3rd runway at SeaTac with an environmentally green concrete. I'm not sure it's going to be that color, but it is green concrete. The concrete uses fly ash to reduce the need for cement production, an energy-intensive project. And we're cutting corners there, but we will save about 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide using this material. So I think you'll all agree that being green, clean, and energy efficient is a worthy goal on a purely standalone basis by itself. It is something that we can and we should do. But I look at this thing a little bit differently. I see it as a competitive edge. I see it as a competitive edge that we will use to our advantage so that we can bring in more jobs and more economic benefits. After all, our fundamental mission here as a port is to create economic vitality here. And so while all these measures that we're going to be taking, we have taken already and will take in the future, will make us greener and cleaner and more energy efficient, the ultimate goal is to use that as our competitive edge so that we can deliver more economic benefits. We will do that by applying sound business principles and by working in partnership. I want to emphasize that. By working in partnership with all of our stakeholders. We will spend our limited resources on programs that are proven or certified. We will go after the low-hanging fruit. We're going to go after the low-hanging fruit because we can capture the benefits there quicker and start benefiting from the benefits earlier. We will rely on the technological experts to take us further in the future and get some of that high-hanging fruit and make them lower so that they are achievable. We're going to rely on that. We have some expertise within the port, but there are a lot of folks working on this stuff, and the trick there is to be smart and business-wise and wait until those things are manageable, before you start spending the money on it. Again, I see this green initiative as a great way to engage and energize my port staff, as well as all the stakeholders within the port community. It's relevant, it's easy to understand, it makes sense, and it is absolutely the right thing to do. So just imagine what it will mean to have 1,600 people, that's how many people we have at the port, as well as a host of others from the port community, thinking every day about how we can make this port greener and cleaner. It will be woven into our fabric, and it will become part of our new culture. I also want to let you know about a couple of other initiatives that we're focusing on. First is social responsibility. The port currently has a goal of 10% of our contracts to small and disadvantaged businesses. Through the first half of this year, that accounted for $6 million in contracts. The Office of Port Jobs, which we help fund and strongly support, just last year helped more than 1,500 people find work at one of our 100 employers in and around the airport. 1,500. Commissioner Bob Edwards currently sits on the Port Jobs board and continues to do a great job. We are going to build on that record. I'm creating a new Office of Social Responsibility. We want to centralize these efforts and really focus on making sure that small businesses and people at all economic levels can benefit from the job creation and financial activity associated with our port. We also will focus on veterans as one of the groups we reach out to. My experience is that veterans, and I are one, are an excellent pool of highly trained, committed, and diverse workers. We are searching for a director of social responsibility as we speak, and once that person is on board, I will be looking to him or her to identify other opportunities where we can engage and be more socially responsible. I think that's going to be a great job for somebody. As you recall, I mentioned we have various lines of business. We've already talked about the airport and the seaport. I'm announcing that we're creating a new real estate division that will include properties from both these divisions, both at the airport and the seaport. I want to emphasize that it is not our intent. It is not our intent to compete with the private sector developers. That's not our role. But it is our intent to optimize the utilization of properties that we already own. That makes a lot of sense. This new division will manage more than 1 million square feet of office and retail space worth approximately $300 million, 3 recreational marinas, 2 fishing terminals, 19 public parks and open spaces, and some significant areas that are ready for redevelopment. That's what this new division is about. This restructuring not only will give us a new focus on real estate, which I felt was lacking up to this point, but it will also allow our two other operating divisions, the airport and the seaport, to really concentrate on their core business, to really focus on what we need to do to remain competitive at the airport and the seaport. And speaking of real estate, let me just briefly update you on the land swap proposal that you have heard something about, I'm sure. I can say without any fear of contradiction that our commission is unanimous in support of the East Rail Corridor coming into the public domain in some way. We are willing to put significant dollars towards such a purchase, and we are hopeful that the county can find all the funds that it needs to purchase that corridor. We've been working in good faith with the county to see how this deal can be put together. It does appear to me, however, that the majority of our commission does not think that the original deal, as has been outlined in the newspapers many times, I'm sure, that original deal makes good sense for the port. The King County Executive Ron Sims has subsequently introduced another variation of that proposal and has actively been promoting it. Some of you may have heard of that proposal. We are not in full support of that version either. And if you recall, part of this land swap has the port as owner of the King County Airport. We have pretty much concluded that for a number of reasons that it doesn't make real good sense for us to be the owner and the operator of the King County Airport. We just don't see the value in the port taking on that financial responsibility. However, if it would be in the best interest of the county, we would be ready to discuss managing that airport on behalf of the county. We're not going to advocate for that because we don't want to come across as empire builders, but if the powers to be ask us to do it, I think that we would be ready to administer or to manage that airport on behalf of all the citizens of county. Given this position, we don't see how we can justify investing some $169 million into the rail and trail asset that we would then turn over to the county. It just doesn't make any sense. However, we think that Ron Sims was very visionary in this idea, and we want to continue to support it to the extent possible, and we will continue to work with him as best we can so that we can get that corridor into the public domain. We are, of course, and remain very interested in the intermodal rail yard and the expanded capacity at Stampede Pass to help move more cargo for the seaport. That brings me to my final point. The port is a great economic engine for this region in terms of jobs. Nearly 200,000 jobs statewide are related to the port in some way. We will maintain that strength and at the same time heighten our environmental stewardship with the help of our stakeholders and our employees. We will significantly increase our social responsibility role and create a new focus on the potential of our three main operating divisions now, airport, seaport, and real estate. We have forged important agreements out in the communities that surround the airport, and we are steadfast in honoring those agreements. But when all is said and done, I would remind you that, that we are a public agency and we are your port. And each of us, each of you, each of us has a vested interest in making sure that we remain a world-class port. Years ago, ports were able to survive and thrive in relative isolation and obscurity. That is no longer the case. We're very, very much integrated into the surrounding communities. So let your voice be heard when we are working to keep jobs in Seattle, to bring properties to useful life, and to improve our environment. Without your support, it's most difficult for the port to thrive, your port to thrive. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Let me ask you a question. There's not much time. I want to take a president's prerogative and ask one question. That is, Prince Rupert, has it got a place after they offload it to ship it out in truck or train? And have we got our problem solved here?
I'm sorry.
Offloading, when you get it offloaded, is it? Do they have train and truck to take it out?
Oh, Prince Rupert?
Yeah.
Yes. So unfortunately, I am reluctant to report that they do have actually pretty good rail service. It has a little bit of a more difficult grade elevation than we do from our port to the Midwest, but it's actually not bad, and I have to tell you there's a lot less traffic on it.
With that, we're adjourned.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from Enterprise Seattle. For over 35 years, Enterprise Seattle has provided client-based economic development services to businesses throughout King County and its 39 cities. More information on Enterprise Seattle and how they help businesses grow and prosper can be found at www.enterpriseseattle.org. And by First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.